Hello, everyone. It is Zena Krogadal. This is Partners to Powerhouse. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited. So Chris isn't here today because today we are going to have a girls talk, straight talk. So for those of you that are joining us live, please make sure you go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give StreamYard permission so we can see your comments. And if not, at least just let us know if you're on Facebook. Give us your name so we know who you are, because we'd love to just, acknowledge that you're on here and welcome you. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Partners to Powerhouse, Zena Krogadal. And you guys, we have an amazing guest coming on today. And let me tell you, Partners to Powerhouse, the premise of this, we believe that every marriage has the capacity to have love and passion coexist harmoniously and simultaneously, to allow your marriage to thrive and go to levels that you didn't even expect in business and in ministry, so that you can leave a lasting impact. So for you to just be able to go from partners to powerhouse. Today, my special guest, this is such a divine appointment, because let me tell you, when I met Bethany, I was actually in North Carolina in the mountains and staying at a timeshare. And I was in the sauna, and her mother and her sister came into the sauna too. And we struck up a conversation. And little did we know that we were actually sisters in Christ, and how exciting that was to find out. And that we have just some passionate things in common, that we truly love marriages to thrive. And so Bethany Marshall, she is a powerhouse. Let me tell you, she is a powerhouse. So without further ado, let me bring her on, because I want to get this conversation started. It is going to be awesome. Hi, Bethany.
Hi, Zena.
How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Yeah.
You look very nice. I love that orange red on you. It's a great
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I love orange. I love bright colors. Yeah.
Yeah, well, looks great on you for sure.
Thank
And
you.
Bethany, I think I'm just so excited that God brought us together in an unexpected way. And I just love those divine appointments. So
Me too. And who would have thought that it would have been like in a sauna? I think about that, and I think about the opportunities that God gives us to connect with others. And, if we would have never introduced ourselves, if we would never struck up a conversation, this would not be happening today. So I love that when we just connected, our conversation just sparked, and that we were quickly able to hear each other's hearts and then find out that we had so much in common. So I am excited for this conversation. I'm excited to continuing to connect and to discover, the things that we don't know that we do connect on. And it's even more. Yeah.
Awesome. Bethany, so the exciting thing is, we wanted to have kind of a girls talk tonight, just the gals here, because I think so many of us, we love our husbands and we're doing life together. Some of us are in business together. Some of us are in ministry together. Some of us are doing both together.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be situations where it can really be challenging on the marriage. And sometimes you just need another woman's ear or woman's perspective. How do I do this? How do we go along and make sure that our marriages are thriving? So, so I love this. So we've got Bethany Marshall. She's going to share the secrets to keeping the spark alive in your marriage, because this is a topic that I think is really tough, because we get married, right? And we're all just all lovey-dovey and things are going great. And then the rose-colored glasses come off, and now it's not as easy as it was, at the beginning. So Bethany, tell us, first of all, tell us your background, where you live right now, and what you're doing, and then we'll get into that conversation.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So my husband and I moved to Altoona, Pennsylvania 14 years ago, and we jumped into ministry together right out of the gate. We got married in 2010. I was in the mental health field for about 8 years, and loved what I did, loved the programs that I was involved in, helping kids, at-risk youth in the school systems. And my husband, is called into youth ministry. So I just, as a wife, wanted to be supportive of that. And so when something opened up in Pennsylvania, at the time we were in Virginia, we moved, and we started off our marriage moving to a place that we knew no one. And it just really created, I think, space for us to really cling to one another, build that firm foundation, and to kind of just deal with the hard stuff of, what comes after the honeymoon, what comes after when real life hits. And, I had to deal with some of my own stuff, and we'll talk about that later on. But we moved to Pennsylvania in 2011, and I started with a job with the mental health agency. And for about 4 years ago, I jumped into full-time ministry. I was helping my husband with youth ministry up to that point as a volunteer. But when I stepped into full-time ministry, stepped back from that in order to focus in on children's ministry and family ministry here at Trans4mation Church, that I'm a family life pastor on staff of, a wonderful staff here. So love what I do, love what God is doing in Altoona, love our families at our church, and I'm just blessed to serve. And so that's what we do. We do full-time ministry together. There are some things that we do alongside of one another, and we get to travel and speak, and that's always a great time that we get to be together as well. So we just love people, and we love sharing God's love in those opportunities that we get, just to breathe life into people and to say, let me encourage you, let me speak truth to you, because you are made for more and God has good plans for you. So we love that message. We love the message of hope, and we love the love of Jesus that just we can share and pour out to others. So in a nutshell, I do outreach ministry here. We do family ministry. I help with the children's ministry, women's ministry, prayer ministry. I have a lot of irons in the fire right now, but it's all good things that I think that are for this season. And so another thing about me is I love coffee. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker, Zena, but I love good coffee. I love strong coffee, like punch me in the face, strong coffee. So that's just one thing fun about me. I love yard sailing. I love the beach. My husband and I are getting ready to go to Outer Banks here, and the 14th we leave. So we're excited about that. But yeah, we just love Altoona. We love where God's planted us. We're able to just, I think, truly get our roots down and network with our community that has been just an amazing community to be a part of.
That's awesome. So I guess I'm curious, what made you pick Altoona, Pennsylvania? Because out of all the places in the United States or even the world, what was Altoona that you were like, this is where we're going?
I know. It's like, I didn't even know where Altoona was when my husband was saying he was interested or had a job opportunity. So there was a connection with Micah's dad and a pastor that is from here, from New Life Worship Center. There was a youth pastor position open, and it just kind of landed on our lap, and we came up and interviewed for it and met with the staff, and we just felt so much peace when we came up here, and we prayed about it, and we just felt like God was opening up the door. We needed to move and be obedient. And so I quickly found out what Altoona, where it was and what was here. And it's just a beautiful place. We're like in the middle of 2 mountain ranges. We get all 4 seasons, and it's just a beautiful place. So God just led us here. He opened the door, and we just, really felt like we needed to be obedient. And we're glad that we did, because there is blessing on the other side of obedience. So we're just so thankful for what God's doing here in Altoona.
Yeah. So here's a question, because, a lot of couples, whether it's at the beginning of marriage or sometime in the years of the adventure that we're having, as you're looking at new seasons of life, and one of you is feeling like, okay, this is what I'm sensing that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
but the other spouse might not be sensing it right away, or maybe they're not sure, and that sort of thing. How do you get onto the same page? What are the things that you guys do to know, hey, we both feel this way? Or how did you get there to know that for sure?
Right. That's a great question because, I can kind of give an example of it just made sense to me at that time when we were married and we lived in Virginia that we would just stay there because my parents lived there. And that's what you do, right? You want to live close to your family and kind of build your home and be close to the people that you love. And I think in marriage, when you're making big decisions, you want to be on the same page and you also want to be open minded to maybe what the Lord is doing in your marriage and where He wants you to be. So it's not the language that I want to be where I want to be. It's I want to be where God wants us to be. And sometimes you need time. And sometimes you need to ask questions like, can I have time to pray about this? Can we have more time to talk about this? Can we maybe come up with a list of pros and cons, and can we talk about the desires that you have for youth ministry and what my role would be in that too? And so there was a conversation that needed to be had, and there was also an open mind that I needed to walk in that conversation with, to know that, okay, I might not be able to live close to my parents, and I need to trust God that He's going to lead us to our place that He has for us. And I need to be, trusting in that guidance of like, God's going to take care of us. And so not being stubborn, I can be very strong willed. So I can come up and say, you know what? I don't think so. And I just need to also keep myself in check in conversations like that, because sometimes you can go into a conversation with a decision already made, and that's not fair. So I think having conversations that you can honestly walk into with an open heart and with an open mind, saying, let's talk about this and let's pray about it. And let's not do it hastily, but let's give it time so that we can say that we've done our diligence to know that we've prayed on this, we've talked about it, and we've had conversations with our family about it, so that we bring them in on it after we've had our own conversation to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about and this is what we're praying about. Will you join us in that? And then there's a decision. So I think for me, I needed to have kind of like a understanding that, okay, it might not be my way, but I know that I want God's way. And so that's kind of, I think when you go into marriage, you got to know that, okay, your decisions don't only affect you, they affect your spouse and they affect your family. They affect those around you. So selfish decisions, yeah, they might feel good in the moment, but it's going to have a ripple effect in your marriage. And so I think that being selfless in a way of saying, I might not want this, but let's at least talk about it to see if we can come to a common ground of like, what can we both compromise, or what can we, maybe someone needs to sacrifice something for a season. And so, marriage is like a team effort, right? Everyone, goes into marriage thinking, oh, it's going to be super easy sometimes, but no, marriage is hard. Marriage is hard work, and you have to have hard conversations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're right. Many times we think, well, if it's our soulmate and we're supposed to be together, it's God ordained, it should be easy. But the reality is, like, we're two sinners coming together and becoming
Yeah.
one. And so it takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of tools and strategies that we have to really work through to come to get united. Because that's the thing, is
Yeah.
that it's not easy to just become united, because we both come in with different hopes and dreams and perspectives. Our lives, we had different life experiences before we came together, and now we're building a life together.
Mhm.
And so I love all those things that you were saying, that, you're praying together, you're also being patient with one another, and
Mhm.
ultimately you're communicating. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes you have to sacrifice and say, okay, maybe it's not now, maybe it's later, because
Yeah.
the reality is, Bethany, would you say that sometimes we have to go back to what is the most important, um,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
in our
What
marriage?
are we prioritizing? right? I think what's most important will be shaped by the perspective that we have in what we think is important. But I think that when we come at it in the perspective of what is God saying is important in our life and chasing that and going after that, because if that's the priority is to please the Lord and to be obedient, then what we think is important comes very like if you compare it to what God is saying what's important, it's going to maybe look different until you get into a rhythm of, okay, Lord, let my desires become your desires, and then there's an alignment, right? But I think that in the beginning, when you're married, you want to chase your dreams, and but there's a coming together, and we bring stuff with us. We bring like you said, our experiences with us. We bring our expectations. We bring what we think our roles are going to be, and when it gets hashed out, sometimes it doesn't go the way we think it's going to, and resentment can come in. And I think that having open communication about how we're feeling about something, even if like we're kind of worried or having some anxiety about some things coming up, your spouse, your husband, he should be a safe person to talk to. He should be your safest place that you can come to and say, I feel really nervous about this. I feel like anxious about this. And, that's marriage is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's the best adventure that you'll ever go on, but it takes work to be intentional. And I think that we got to be intentional with conversations and not hold things in, because you can root things in your heart that will eventually cause a divide in your marriage, like resentment, bitterness, because if you don't lay those sacrifices down and say, okay, it's going to happen, but not yet for me, so that I can cheer on my spouse so that he can go after some things. Micah and I, we've had the blessing of being able to kind of achieve some of the dreams at the same time. But I know that we've had some friends that had to seriously put some pause buttons and say, you know what, we're going to have kids first and put some pause buttons in our life. And it's hard because when you're in different seasons, like Micah and I are in different seasons than our friends, there can be some resentment, some bitterness, because you're seeing other people achieve things that you haven't achieved yet, and that you can allow that to come in. So that's another factor too, is like, be open, but be intentional with conversations.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, we have to watch those foxholes that can really get us, and
Yeah.
I love too that you had mentioned, how we have to just be open and be really willing to not only be open, but also be willing to listen to your spouse and be open to what they have to say, whether you agree or not. Because it reminded me, as you were saying that, takes me back to in the beginning in the garden, where God, Adam and Eve are there, and they're naked and they're not afraid. They're naked, unashamed, and they're not afraid before the fall. And so that was the intent from the very beginning, that we would be in the most vulnerable state with each other, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and not be ashamed and not be afraid. But from the fall, obviously we have a lot of issues, and we've tried to cover up that nakedness, and it's hard to be vulnerable. Even in a marriage, at times we hesitate, and it takes time to be able to feel like, okay, can I share this or can I not share this? And depending on how our spouse responds will determine if we share more or we don't share, or we go back, right? And so those are things to remember. And so as part of, we were talking about keeping the spark alive in your marriage. I think sometimes as we go on, we can become more closed up if we're not careful on how we handle the information that our spouse gives us. And the honest truth is that, in the beginning of our marriage, as we're learning about each other, I don't know that I was always very delicate, when my husband would share certain things, and vice versa, that we kind of had to learn, oh, we got to be a little more gentle and compassionate, not, oh,
Yeah.
why would you think that? I just
Right.
remember that sometimes just innocent words would come out because you're thinking we're best friends. So I just talked to him like he's my girlfriend.
Right.
But he's sharing something pretty deep for him. And, let's face it, men don't always share their feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be
It's
very
hard.
careful.
Yeah.
It's hard for them.
Yeah.
So for those that maybe, here they are into their marriage, the honeymoon period is over, the rose-colored glasses are off, and they may be finding some tension in their marriage. Bethany, what would you
Mm.
advise them? What are the things that you would say to help them get through this?
Yeah, I think that, who wants to be around someone where there's like, you can honestly cut the tension with a knife, right? I think that tension, it's uncomfortable. And, when you are married, you're living together. There's no way to, unless you were literally doing the silent treatment and you were sleeping in two different rooms, you have to work pretty hard to ignore one another. But I think that setting a time, if you need space, have your space, but communicate that you need space, because space can be translated into you're ignoring me, you're giving me the silent treatment. And I think that, when you are having an argument or things are tense, that, a great way to go about that is just say, hey, I am not ready to have a conversation yet. And I need to deal with some of my own emotional maybe responses and emotional feelings that I am just trying to sift through, that I need time before I can have a conversation, that I can, have some self-control with the words that I say, because you don't want to say something you're going to regret, because you love that person, right? You don't want to hurt them, but it's so easy sometimes to like lash out in your emotion and your anger that can only make that tension grow worse. And I think that having space, but communicating that is super important, to say, hey, later tonight, whenever whenever you set that time, let's just say it's tonight, let's talk about it at 7 o'clock. Let's meet and let's talk. And, you might only get 5 minutes in, but at least you're making those little connections. I think marriage is all about that emotional connection, that spiritual connection, and the physical connection. And so many times, in marriages, you can emphasize the physical or the spiritual and lack in the emotional. And the emotional connection is having those heart to heart moments, is working out those emotions and working out that tension and working out that thing that can easily be so disconnected in marriage. And emotional connection leads into the spiritual and the physical. So a lot of times in our marriages, if we don't have the emotional connection that we need, it's going to trickle in and infiltrate spiritual and physical, where, you could be in separate rooms, doing life. And that's not a fulfilled marriage. That's not marriage in the fullness. And I think that, if we could be honest to say, hey, this is tough right now, but like, let's talk about this, but let's also create some boundaries where, if we start raising our voice, if we start getting, we're going to step away and take a break. And I think that is just working through those things until we, like you said, you learn one another throughout the years of being together. And I think that in different seasons, there's going to be other things that kind of press up against you. And you might not realize that you are being like, your tone is off, and you're just like, it's because you're in a really tough season. And you're like, this conversation is the last conversation I want to have because of the pressure of this season, or maybe you have a lot going on. But know that, remember that you love him, right? You love him, and you decided to be committed, and you decided to put the work into this marriage. And so however that looks, setting a time to talk, creating some space, but communicating that, and finding ways to reconnect. I think that when things are disconnected in marriage, if it's not attended to, if we don't have the awareness to say and to hear and to see that, oh, we're not connecting as much as we usually do. I mean, I know that our schedules personally get so full, right? And if we're traveling and we are meeting with people and we're investing and pouring into other people all week long, sometimes we just have nothing left, right? It's hard. It's hard. But I'll say things like, we just need to connect this week, whatever that is, whether that's like Micah and I going to Starbucks for an hour and like talking and reconnecting on things that we just personally connect on. It kindles that once again, right? It's not ignoring it and saying, oh, we're just going to live together and do life together and not be aware of the switches that go on and off in our relationship, where if we're like spiritually not connecting or physically or emotionally, the awareness to have to say, hey, let's turn that switch back on. Let's connect. Let's have these conversations. Let's do something together. Let's be intentional to begin to cultivate a marriage that is attended to, not just when you get to the point where then you need to reconstruct and get back to the repairing and get back to like the things that maybe you could have along the way attended to. So marriage, it's something like you need to constantly put your attention to, not because you have to, because you want to, right? Because, you're in a relationship that you've committed that you're going to give everything you have into. And I think that distractions can come, but like coming back to a place where, hey, are we connecting on these areas? What does that look like for you? And diving down deep to know that like, yeah, I want more out of my marriage. How do I get more? And it's just being open, like we talked about in the beginning, and saying, this is how I'm feeling. These are my desires. These are my dreams, and being open with each other and saying, yeah, let's talk about those things. How can we do that together?
Yeah. That's awesome. That just, those, I mean, you're giving such great wisdom, nuggets in there. And so you do both, you both are in ministry, but you also run a business as well. Is that correct? Or
Well, my
you have,
husband does. Yeah, he has a nonprofit, Refuge Youth Network, and then I run like a women's ministry, daughters conference that we do, and that is, I just say I'm like a gatherer of women. Like my desire is for every generation to know the love of Jesus and to know their God-given identity in Him and to stand firm in faith. And so, that's something that we have. And then I also have children's books. So I have a business for that, Bethany Marshall Books. And so Books by Bethany is what it's called. But so, yeah, I run that. But that's, that's a dream that my husband supported me in and he invested in. And I'm just so thankful. Like he just cheers me on. And I wouldn't have those children's books if it wasn't for him. So truly thankful for that.
That's awesome. Now, can you get the children's books? Are they on Amazon or where?
Yeah. Barnes and Noble online, Walmart online, Target online, Amazon, and we have them in a few local shops around the area as well. So, but yeah, you can order them online. I even have it's on my website, booksbybethany.com. You can find them there too.
That's great. Yeah. So you guys get to all those sites and get her books. I mean, wow, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
We live in a culture that I think you can't pour into your children too much, especially when you got good children's books and that sort of thing. And coming from somebody who has a great Christian perspective, I think it's all the more important today than ever to really make sure our children are truly getting a great firm foundation and being able to do that. So yes, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, get to, did you say, what was the website again?
Booksbybethany.com.
Bybethany.com. Okay. Booksbybethany.com. I'm going to type it here because I want to make sure that people can get to that.
Great.
And get those on their hands. Now, my question to you is, so you've experienced both running business and doing ministry together. But here's the thing, that those that are in ministry together, I think sometimes we can get to a place where we can almost put the ministry ahead of the marriage and not even realize it because we get into I'm doing it for Jesus. This is the part of the ministry. This is part of serving. But what happens, and we've seen this over and over again, is that ministry leaders, when they're not careful, their marriage can fall apart. And unfortunately, in the church, the divorce rate is just as high inside the church as it is outside the church. And I don't know about you, Bethany, but that to me, that is shocking. And I think it's unacceptable because here we have the truth of God giving us the principles to apply in our marriage, but yet we can't sustain our marriage. And better than the world. And so that means there's something that's missing. But like I was
Yeah.
saying, sometimes when we're doing ministry, it's easy to just get to where we're serving other people so much that we forget our own ministry at home. So give us some tips, give us your insight into how can we fix that, or how do we come to a place where we can even recognize that? I mean, what are the signs that maybe we are maybe over serving and
Mhm.
underserving our marriage, underserving our families?
Yeah, I think, it's so easy to get caught up, especially if you are involved in church and leading a ministry. There is passion there to do it. There's a drive, and so if you're like me, I'm a very driven person. I'm a very passionate person, and I just like to go, go, go. And so, my husband has had to remind me, okay, balance, Bethany, balance, and we try each week to kind of align our schedules and to make sure that we're making time for each other, and keeping that time, and not, saying, pushing it aside because, oh, we just live together, we're going to see each other, during the week. So, we'll be fine. But it's just, again, going back to that intentionality with each other, date nights, or maybe it's Netflix at home and you order in and you're having a meal, but it's creating boundaries in those moments too, that, okay, we're not going to talk about ministry. We're not going to answer calls. We're not going to, respond to text messages that are, ministry related, or even just at all, because we are focusing on one another. Now, I'm not saying this because I am perfect at this. I am still a work in progress. I am not, I'm not a professional at this. I don't have it down yet, but I know that, I can see how clearly it could consume you when you're involved in ministry and it just take over, because, there's just so much to do. There is so much to do. And, I think that when we allow that to be the driving force of, okay, what is it feeding in me? Sometimes we got to keep ourselves in check too. It's like, you are not what you do, right? Who you are is not what you do. And it's who you are. So reminding yourself, okay, at the end of the day, I'm Bethany Marshall. I'm a child of God. I am a wife, and I, first and foremost, I'm committed to my marriage, family first. And that's what Micah and I talk, and we encourage leaders that, family first, God first, family, and ministry, right? So we got to have that in order too, to say, okay, when things are out of balance, how do we get back into a rhythm that is healthy, that we are investing and putting time into things that we truly treasure in life, and not take things for granted? Because I think that, yeah, we can get consumed in things and yet leave our spouse, high and dry and say, hey, how do we get here? And then you move, you move on and you're like, how did we even get here? And so it's those little moments, it's the daily check-ins, it's the conversations that you have, and knowing and having the awareness to say, am I spending too much time, or am I mentally, because you can be home with one another and not be mentally present. You can be working on your laptop at home and not be mentally present, right? And so being present in that moment with your husband, whatever you're doing, that's going to build, that you talk about builders, you talk about, building things in your life, but yeah, you get to build a marriage together. And how you build is when you take pockets of time and you're present with one another, and you're being compassionate, like you mentioned earlier, and you're maybe listening, or maybe you're encouraging, and you're feeding their love tank, right? You're, whatever their love language is, you're just being intentional with that too. And, my husband's a words of affirmation, person. And so encouragement really just sparks him. And, me not having that love language, I have to remind myself to show that and to do that, so that he knows that, okay, I am aware of what's happening and I am encouraging him. And it's so natural for him to encourage me, because that's his love language. He's like, yeah, babe, you're doing it. Good job. I love you. Da, da, da. And so I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, the way that I receive love is different. And I'm like, buying him little gifts and stuff because I love gift giving. But what makes him feel loved is those encouraging words. And so me even being aware of that on the daily, whether that's sending him a text, whether that's, doing the little things, those little things build like as little bricks. And so I think in marriage, if we think of it that way, we're building a strong structure that, when things come into our marriage, when things try to come into our marriage, we have this structure that's strong enough to say, no, like we're in this together. Right. And so, I think that it's also having key leaders and key people in your life to also keep yourself accountable. Right. And to not put it all on your shoulders. But I'm really big on teamwork and delegating and empowering people to help serve and come alongside of you, right? Because we can't do everything. We can't be all things to all people. We can't be on the clock 24/7. That's not realistic. And so I think it comes back to a healthy lifestyle of balance, right? And then to take time for yourself too. And what do you do to refuel yourself? What refills you and what helps you, from getting burned out? Because I think that's important too, because when you're burned out, then you're not pouring into your marriage, right? And so it all connects. Everything connects. Every decision that we make, every time commitment that we make will make an impact on those around us. And so it's just reprioritizing things too. And like I said, I am not perfect at this, Zena. So I'm still, each and every day, we just try to do our best. But
well, it's so good. So good what you're sharing. And I honestly think, I don't think we're ever going to arrive as long as we have breath, we're here on this earth. Because there's a couple of things. Even when we get to a place where we feel like we're really in full alignment with our spouses and we're on the same page and things are just going so well, we're connecting emotionally, physically, spiritually, and we're just having a great time. But we're human beings and we're constantly growing and changing. And I don't know about you, Bethany, but even from, sometimes month to month or year to year, whatever, things that I liked a month ago, today I might not be as crazy about it. And so, or God is always transforming the mind and renewing the spirit. And I'm always learning and growing. Same thing with my husband. And so we are constantly having to come together and rediscover each other. And and honestly, it makes it fun, but sometimes it can be frustrating because you're like, wait a minute, that's not what you were really liking before. And that's not what you said your dream was back then. And now you're changing it on me. And I think sometimes when we get married, we think that life is going to be a certain way and it's never going to change. Like we have this idea, expectation in our head. And we're working for women. I've heard this, women marry men hoping they're going to change. Men marry women hoping they'll never change. And she does, and he doesn't, kind of thing. And so our expectations are a little bit different, but I think it is an ongoing intention. Like you said, we always have to put that effort in, but it also keeps that mystery alive. So I love the things that you, have said, how do you stay connected and how do you keep the spark alive? Because it is so easy to get distracted. And Bethany, as you are in ministry and in the church world, I know that there have been couples who waited until marriage, which I think is a beautiful thing, that they were pure and they waited till, they got married to engage in physical sexual activity. And sometimes it was really hard for them to even perhaps even understand or navigate that because perhaps their parents didn't talk to them about it or prepare them for that moment. And when we watch movies and read books and stuff, we had this in mind that the honeymoon was going to be this grand, amazing thing. And some couples end up feeling disappointment in that area. And so for some, that moment sparked a place where that physical encounter became not something that they were looking forward to. Like they had to really work towards that. Or, you even get through life where you just take each other for granted. You don't have the same sex drive as you get older. It's not the same as when you were younger. And so, trying to keep that spark alive and that physical attraction to one another, I think for a lot of people, and as Christians, I think it's hard for them to talk about it
Mm-hmm.
to others. And so for that couple that maybe they are just having kind of that hard time, what does this really look like? What does God really expect? And are we, is it that important? Because sometimes I know, you know, religious, expectations sometimes have put a real damper on that area for some women over the past, decades previous.
Mm.
Um, and so some women thought it's only for having children. It's not there for having fun or enjoyment. And so these are, I don't know, have you found that
That's a lot. Yeah, I mean, and we can have a whole segment like on just that, because there's so many core beliefs, there's so many things that we're taught, there's so many things that people have been raised up believing, that it's bad, but it's bad only until you get married. And then, you have that moment and you're like, is this wrong? And dealing with all of that. And, it's having the conversation of, I think, with telling our girls of like saying, it's good, but it's you have to wait for it. It's for marriage, and it's a good thing. God's designed it. God's created it. And because I think sometimes we our mind's programmed, right, to say it's wrong, it's bad, I shouldn't do it. No, like, and then when they get married, they have issues, right? They have this battle within them and say, oh, I was taught all my life it was wrong, and but and then that you factor in, what if there's trauma involved? What if, a couple, they come together and there's been a history of trauma, sexual trauma, right? And so I think that I would say to those couples who are struggling or aren't connecting on that level, go get counseling, go to marriage counseling, go to couples counseling, go to Christian counseling, and kind of discover what the root of what that is and bring it forth so that you can be vulnerable enough to have conversations to say, this is where I'm at, but this is not where I want to be. This is something that's designed by God for marriage. It's a wonderful thing. It's an amazing thing. And it's not only for creating children, right? And it's just something that marriage has that is sacred, that is holy, that is pleasing to the Lord when it's done in the right way. And I think that, if marriages are struggling, they need to go and they need to talk to someone about it together. I think that getting to the root of some of those things is key. And those things need to be brought forth so that they can move forward, because marriage, you can discover in a marriage, there is so much, like you said, there's so many layers to it, because there's so many layers to us, right? That there's seasons that maybe bring out things that maybe, oh, wow, I didn't used to like that, but now I do. And we're changing. But the important thing is that we're growing together and we're changing together, right? And then it's not that we're going apart, but it's keeping us together. And there's so many things that, I could be talking about right now about there's things that happened, in our marriage that could have easily pulled us apart. And by the grace of God, we're still together, and it's actually made us stronger. And I think that, if we are having issues, it's being open and honest to say, okay, do we need some advice here? Do we need some counseling here? Do we need to talk about maybe what the root of that is and what the belief system is in something that may be different than our spouse, So that's a quick, short answer to that loaded question, that loaded topic. But, being connected physically in your marriage and in a way that you both are comfortable, right, is so important. And it ties into the emotional and spiritual. It's like a circle. It's all connected. And when there's balance and when there's health there, your marriage can then thrive.
Yeah, no, that was a great answer to, there was a lot in that question for sure. And that was a great answer. And you're right. I think, many times we don't want to go talk about the issues with others. And so here's the other thing, Bethany. So one spouse may be like, we really need help. We really need counsel. We really need to go talk to somebody. But then you've got the other spouse like, no, we don't. We can work this out ourselves. What is your advice to that person who is feeling frustrated, saying, I know that our marriage can be better. We can have more spark in it, but we just are stuck. But my spouse isn't really willing to come to counseling. How do you
Yeah.
move forward with that?
Yeah. So again, having that conversation and say, okay, you're not ready. You don't want to do this, but this is something that I need too. So sometimes it just starts with one spouse going, one person going. Because the only person that you can change is yourself, right? The only person that you can really make the changes that you need starts with you. And so I think that, when you work on that, then you give it to the Lord and you pray and you say, God, you're gonna have to work on his heart or her heart, and help me in this as I do this to make me better, to make me the person that I want to be for my marriage. Lord, help us come together on this. And sometimes it's like a year down the road, could be some months down the road till maybe they agree to come, one day, but you can only control what you can control, which is yourself. Right. And so I think that sometimes it's just one person going at first, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Take that as a win. Take that as a step. Take that as one step, and then see what God does. And you never know. It could be sooner than you think that they can say, "Oh, I see the changes that are happening." And you can even talk with those. Say, "Hey, this is what I talked about in counseling today. It was really helpful for me. These are the questions that were asked." And asking him, maybe in the comfort of your own home, and seeing if that opens up anything. There's some things that you can transfer, over as you learn, maybe some better questions to ask, or different, not better perspective, but different perspective that your counselor is giving you to say, hey, this is what you're struggling with. How about you approach it this way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And then, as we go along too, when we lose that connection, sometimes it can feel awful lonely, right? You can feel
Yeah.
like now I just have a roommate, not really a marriage partner. And this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I thought marriage was going to be. And I've been, coming into counseling because there are couples who do that, who will come in, but they still feel that lack of spark. So to that couple, what would you say? How do they bring that back in? Like, what are the practical steps that they can do, or how do they get past that place where they feel like even when they reached out for help, it's not quote unquote working?
Yeah. So there could be many, many factors that play into that scenario. Maybe it's abuse. Maybe there's like some things happening that there's just major disconnect. There's no relational connection happening at all. One book that I want to recommend that I did want to bring up is 4 Habits of a Joy-Filled Marriage by Marcus Warner and Chris Kersey. And so it talks about how 15 minutes a day will help you stay in love, brain science hacks that boost your emotional, spiritual, and physical connection. So, there's a thing that we can cultivate in our marriage that is called joy. And sometimes what happens is there's a joy gap that happens in our marriage. And it's that relational connectivity that when we look at each other in the eyes, that's a connection right there. That's, you're being relational. And so when people have their emotional connection or relational connection, like their switch is off, they're not looking at you in the eyes, they're looking everywhere else. And this book has some really great tools, has some just really great keys that you can implement and you can use in your marriage that could help with these gaps and help with reconnection. And it's a Christian book, but there is titles like this: Appreciation Daily, Play Together, Why Joy Can Be So Hard to Find, and The Brain Science Behind Joy. And so somewhere along the way, there's been a gap, right? There's been disconnect. It's been hard to connect on maybe things that they used to connect on, and there's just been almost like a loss. And grief can do that in marriage. Like if you've lost a child, or if you lost a job, if you lost, a family member that was close, there's grief there. And sometimes grief, we all grieve differently. And so whatever it is, it could be grief, could be loss. It could be, that maybe you're not where you wanted to be in life, disappointment, and I think it's just, again, identifying what the root is. The root is so important, and it speaks to where you are, right? And what you're going through, and maybe how you're responding to things. And so, whether it's like 5 minutes a day to connect and just do something together that's maybe new, fun, that you both enjoy, but it's going to be a daily thing. It's not going to happen overnight, but just being open and honest.
Give that book title again.
Yes. So it's called The 4 Habits of a Joy-Filled Marriage.
Okay. I love that you brought that up, because I do believe that is the key to a lot of issues in life, is when we don't focus on the gratitude and the joy. I mean, the Bible mentions so many times about give thanks with a grateful heart.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the science, it really is showing that those who are grateful and thankful and live a life of thankfulness, regardless of their circumstance, there's healing that occurs just in that particular action in itself. So no matter what's happening, that is something that, we give advice when we're counseling couples, is let's take a step back and each write down what you're grateful for your spouse. Let's not focus
that's powerful.
Let's not focus on what they're not doing, or where they're missing the mark, or any of that. Let's focus on what in this time, and it can be something little, it doesn't have to be this big thing. Sometimes I'm grateful that, my husband gets up in the morning and makes me coffee. Sometimes we can take that for granted, that can even occur. Or I'm thankful that we both can actually look at each other and see each other, because some people don't have vision in their marriage, or we can look at each other. So when you start to focus on
the little things,
right? You can't help but, like you said, have that joy-filled heart. And so, that's a great book. So you guys absolutely pick up that book and because I think that is a huge key for success in many, many areas of life. But you're right, especially marriage, because sometimes we can forget, especially when we feel like we're the enemies. I'm sleeping with the enemy, not sleeping with
right. Exactly. It's like, you're not my enemy. And sometimes it's easier to like focus on the negative, right? We can harp on that, but really there's good there. Even in the worst day, you could find something good. And focusing on that gratitude, focus on the things that are positive, will uplift you and shift your perspective. And so, science even says that anxiety and gratitude cannot exist at the same time in your brain.
That's good.
So when you are cultivating gratitude, anxiety has to go. Like it can't exist in the same space. So, that's powerful. When you begin to really practice gratitude, it's going to shift and change things and help you, stay positive. And on your worst day, you'll still be able to find something good in it. And so, I love this author, Chris Curtsey. He also writes The Joy Switch, which is just all about your brain, neuroscience, and what God has to say about how he's created us and how we are created to live in a place of joy. And then there's one for kids too, how to raise 4 habits to raise joy-filled kids. So you'll have to check them all out. They're awesome.
I'll definitely have to check those all out. Yeah. Bethany, I can't believe this time is already.
I know. Oh my gosh. How is it almost 54 minutes? Oh my goodness.
I don't know, but I've absolutely been enjoying this conversation, and I want to make sure that if anybody that wants to get a hold of you can, so I'm going to put your email up here. So, Great. Bethany obviously is just such a light in this world, and she is joy-filled. You can see that in her presence and her demeanor. And so you
Oh,
guys absolutely connect with her, reach out to her. And I love that we live in a time right now that distance and even time doesn't stop the connection. It used to be
yeah,
that you had to be in the same close vicinity to ever, really meet just that, people there. But now
right.
it's opened up to where we can have relationships across the world and jump on a screen and see each other and have the conversation and
It's
feel like,
awesome.
wow, we can have this connection. So I love that
Yeah.
I was born in this time and this current time for to do the ministries, to reach out to
Mm,
people. So take advantage, get a hold of Bethany
yes.
and have a conversation with her.
I would love that. Yeah.
What else would you like to leave us with as we close up tonight?
Oh, well, I would love to leave you with just the knowledge that you are created for a purpose and that you're not a mistake and that relationships are hard, but they're worth it. We're created for relationships, that we are relational people. And so, and just to remember that hard conversations are hard, but they're necessary. And just to maybe gather the courage and ask the Lord for the courage and the boldness to have those conversations, because we come out of those sharper, stronger, and better. So I'm all about growth and growing and becoming stronger and be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. So I know that with that comes hard work and hard conversations, but it's always worth it. So keep going, keep working, and know that what you're doing is not in vain, that there's a purpose that God has for you. So keep being faithful.
Mm, beautiful. So once again, Bethany's email, BethanyMarshall87@gmail.com. Make sure you connect with her. Thank you so much for being on here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
What a great conversation. And I have
Yeah,
a feeling this is not the only time you're going to be on with Partners to Powerhouse. And at
I
some
hope
point,
so.
I'd love to have our husbands on with us too. That
Yes.
would be a nice conversation as well.
Oh,
So
that would be awesome.
we'll
Yeah.
have to plan for that. And so we'll just say goodbye for now, but
Okay.
it's just for now. So
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
thank you guys so much for being on here. And if you found value in this, please go ahead and share it out. What a great message. And I think somebody out there needed to hear what Bethany shared tonight. And absolutely get her books, get her children's books, and get the book that she was recommending. So the four habits of what was it? The four habits of joy. So definitely get that on your reading list. And don't be a stranger. Reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you. And until next time, we will see you on Partners to Powerhouse. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.